Okay. Hi, everyone. My name is Abrianna Jean-Baptiste. I go by she, they pronouns. I am the president of the Pride Student Union. I'm also a student assistant with the Pride Center, and I thank you all for joining us for this event, Black Brilliance and Self-Sustainability. To begin, I want to make sure that the audience knows that they can leave at any time if they feel triggered in any way. I want to make sure that our panelists here today feel vulnerable and honest with the community to make sure that their methods of self-care are not triggering to anyone, but also uplifting to the community. So to begin, I would like the Director of the Office of Social Justice and Inclusion, David Bynes, to speak a little bit about his self-care methods and his perspective on today's event. So let's give it up for David Bynes. Just sit.
Thank you, Aubrey.
Thank you, David.
Not quite sure I understood the assignment, but we'll figure it out. So again, my name is David Bynes. I go by he, him, his pronouns. And so I want to thank Aubrey for the opportunity and the Pride Student Union for the work they're doing. Shout out to the OSJI staff and the Pride Center. And so I'll talk a little bit about my self-care methods in a minute. But I really want to hit home on this idea of Black brilliance and then the sustainability. I was joking with Avery, and I told her I was going to hit her over the head for coming up with this complex title. And so for me, when I think about Black brilliance and adding the self-sustainability, for me, on its face, it represents a very complex and sometimes complicated understanding of our beingness and how we decide to take ownership of who we are. Understanding this is vital to our way of life because historically, Black, Indigenous, and other people of color and marginalized communities have not held our own ownership of our agency and certainly not of our bodies. I often pause and consider what might have run through the minds of our ancestors as they recognized that their freedom was being forcefully stripped away from them as they were ushered into holding spaces and then into the dark bellies of waiting ships to cross the Atlantic, where they would endure the harsh realities of the Middle Passage, where many of them would not survive for one reason or another. They would become subjects that would be turned physically and mentally and emotionally into what we now call the enslaved. I pause and I think about what Saidiya Hartman calls the afterlife of slavery. And though many generations have passed, I still have to sit with the idea that I too am the afterlife of slavery. Mm-hmm. And it's in that space that Black brilliance exhibits power and meaning as I consider just how the Black body was able to endure treacherous encounters and yet still rise and ascend into unbelievable realms of existence. It is Charles F. Coleman, the founder and executive director of Edge Movement in New York City, that declares that Black brilliance is anything but a simple statement. It is a concept that we believe beholds the key towards not only unlocking the inner potential in every one of us, but one capable of also shifting the conversation in our community. It is an inclusive concept and intended to encourage its wearer to discover and to take new steps toward brilliance. More than a saying, Black brilliance represents who we are, and it reminds us that we have no limits on what we can achieve. And so as I contemplated the meaning of Black brilliance, I also thought about some of my sheroes and heroes. And so for me, Black brilliance is Anna Julia Cooper. For me, Black brilliance is Carter G. Woodson and Septima Clark and W.E.B. Du Bois and Fannie Lou Hamer. Black brilliance is Stokely Carmichael and Claudette Colvin, Ella Baker and Huey P. Newton and Marsha P. Johnson and Bayard Rustin and James Baldwin and Maya Angelou, Toni Morrison, Zora Neale Hurston, and of course El Hajj Malik El Shabazz, more commonly known as Malcolm X, and Martin Luther King. For me, Black brilliance is Audre Lorde and so many others that continue to challenge me to not only think about what Black brilliance is, but also how it is this conceptual ideology personified and nurtured. In other words, we must also think about how is Black brilliance then self-sustained. Audre Lorde is one of my favorite feminists, and she contends that caring for oneself is not self-indulgence. It is self-preservation, and that is an act of political warfare. And so whenever I think about Audre Lorde or I read her work, I also think about the other Black feminist lesbians that made up what is known as the Combahee River Collective. That would be Barbara Smith and Beverly Smith, Demita Frazier and Cheryl Clark, Akaja Hull, Margot Akawaza Ray, and Charlene McRae. And I think about them because it represents for me the self-sustainability and self-care in Black brilliance. The Combahee River Collective was a Black feminist lesbian socialist organization active in Boston from 1974 to 1980. And the collective argued that both the white feminist movement and the civil rights were not addressing their particular needs as Black women, and even more specifically as Black lesbians. The collective are perhaps best known for developing the Combahee River Collective Statement, a key document in the history of contemporary Black feminism and the development of the concepts of identity politics as used among political organizations and social theorists, and for introducing the concept of interlocking systems of oppression, a key concept of intersectionality. And so through writing this statement, the Combahee River Collective connected themselves to the activist tradition of Black women in the 19th century and to the struggles of Black liberation of the 1960s. The CRC also connected themselves to one another, creating a sustainable model of self-care and support through oneness in community. As you think about Black brilliance in the idea of self-sustainability throughout this event, it is my hope that you will gain the understanding that the concept is a means of taking ownership of our agency and of our beingness through the idea of self-determination, while also remembering that we must also find the time to rest and to recalibrate, to recharge, and ultimately that we might regenerate healing from within as we also then embrace our own brilliance. And so for me, it's exactly that, remembering who I am, right? And so the idea of Black brilliance in sustainability is to know who I am in past, who I am in present, and who I am already in future. And it comes with the idea of remembering to rest, recalibrate, and also then to regenerate for my beingness and my own self-healing. Thank you.
Thank you so much, David. Thank you. That was really awesome. And we have our awesome panelists here who I'd like to introduce, beginning with Charity Watson. We also have Summer Hurd, Travis Stokes, Garth Headley, and Z. Lopez del Carmen. So I thank them all for joining us today, and I really wanted to focus on your perspectives because you have a variety of leadership roles within the community. And I know previously in our last year's Black Brilliance event, we really focused on Black brilliance and success within the community. So I really wanted to change the narrative this time and really focus on aspects of self-care, wellness, and wellness in the Black community, because oftentimes there's a stereotypical narrative of Black people and, you know, not necessarily being able to take care of themselves because they're always working. But I feel as we can be brilliant within taking care of ourselves as well. And this is the message that I feel Pride Student Union and the Pride Center wanted to push on to FIU. And I just want to thank the Black Student Union also for collaborating with us on this event. So I wanted to ask you all, what does the title Black Brilliance and Self-Sustainability mean to you?
Okay.
You know, Travis will start.
Always wants me to go first. Well, it breaks down several things for me, right? And so I understand that I'm Black in a space where I'm also LGBTQ identified. And so for being Black in my ancestry, therefore I am brilliant, right? And so because they did what they did for me to be here, the brilliance carries on. And so when you are able to reach out and touch and grab and bring people along with you, that allies the brilliance. And so for me, that's what it comes from. And when you're talking about self-sustainability, it's sustaining yourself so that you can give to other people that you bring them with you. That's the whole point of ancestry, right? So keep bringing people with you so that you can leave a legacy behind you. And what will your legacy be?
That's beautiful, Travis. I definitely think that that ideology of like the wellness and the brilliance being generational is something that we don't often think of, but I believe that the things that we've taken on in our ancestry, you know, lives on within us. So I definitely wanted to focus on the fact that, you know, our ancestors, even though they didn't have much autonomy, we want to make sure that we arise that within our generations and keep moving that message forward. So I think that was an awesome answer. Does anybody else have any opinions on what the title may mean to them?
I think I'd offer that in the space of looking at legacy, in the space of sharing Blackness with a community, there is an individual responsibility as well. And I think it's important for us to hold ourselves to a higher standard of ourselves, not in comparison to others, not in comparison to what has been done before us, not in comparison to what society might expect of us, but what we inherently feel are our own innate capabilities, and to be constantly looking to self-improve, not for anyone else's evaluation, but to hold ourselves to a higher standard of excellence of ourselves, to be better tomorrow than we were today, with making small increments towards a better version or a higher version of ourselves, whatever we define that to be. I think we get not so much trapped, but we get so many references from society, from our world, that tells us, well, you're supposed to be this. There is work to be done for us as Black individuals, as LGBTQ identifying individuals, on what is important for us and what is aspirational for us personally, and move towards that. For me, that defines Black excellence, by holding yourself to a higher standard of yourself and moving towards that all the time.
That's beautiful. I wanted to point out that essence of, you know, focusing on yourself and giving to yourself so you can, you know, not only regenerate, but identifying what self-care means to you individually. I think for a lot of us, especially with the modern day trend of self-care, it's easy to get caught up in this idea that maybe I should be taking care of myself this way or that way. But a lot of the times, the thing that we may see on social media and other platforms may not be inclusive to all communities. So realizing where you are in your life and realizing what things you can do to elevate or even just to stay where you are, I think is really important. So highlighting that this month and every month, I think is important as well. So I wanted to ask you all, what are some ways that you take care of yourselves? I know especially within your roles in the community, we often do a lot of giving. So how do you give back to yourselves?
Okay. So I'll jump in this one if that's okay. So within my role, we're focusing on social justice, right? And it's actually a conversation you and I were having when we walked in on fairness and unfairness and identifying the usage of your time, right? And what is it that's equal and fair to you and your needs, right? There is a self-agency that comes in taking care of yourself, and there is a preservation that comes from legacy when you yourself are prepared to be able to get in front of your community and to be able to go into that type of work. So when you're talking about self-care in that sense and what you do to take care of yourself without ultimately removing yourself from the work that you're doing, there is no one size fits all, right? Everybody has to figure out what works for you. But in my sense, I have realized that because my work is centered around connection and making sure that all voices are heard, many times I default into operations, even when I'm in my relaxing area, right? So it is for me to find a space where I can wholeheartedly be, where there is no expectation of the time, where I'm not clock watching, right? Where I'm not telling people, where I am with a group of people that are so invested themselves into our collective care, and the fact that we need that for, again, regenerating our power to be able to come back and be impactful, that we develop a culture when we are together of rest, where we develop a culture where the expectation is to be yourself and to be in liberty, whatever that may be, rather than having to be able to look around and say, this friend or this individual does not have the space and time to be present. Therefore, I have to turn myself on and assure that everybody is making the space, right? You have to be very conscientious if you're doing it alone or with others to be sure that you are developing the culture and the discipline to be able to find yourself in a resting place.
I think that's beautiful. I think highlighting the fact that, you know, you don't always have to be 100% on all of the time. I feel like as a community, I know especially for myself, I carry this burden of like, you know, if someone else's energy isn't 100%, I have to fill that up for them. But a lot of times I get lost in the sense of, but how am I filling my own cup?
Right.
And it's easy for me to give while I'm so drained. And that only leads me into a sense of, you know, what am I doing? Because now I'm drained and I'm trying to give the community, but I feel like I don't have much to give. And it's like, it's not fair to myself. And I just want to, like, the audience and everyone here to be mindful of that, of like the things that you are doing to not only uplift your future, but to uplift others to fill up your cup as well.
I see where you're coming from with that, and I think to Z's point, there is, I think what feeds that is this fundamental work that has to be done as individuals, where we take the time to find out, understand, make peace with what our values are. Because if you take the time to sit and say, okay, what are my top 3 values? What are the things that I'm willing to fight for, champion for, you know, pay for, sacrifice for? And you narrow those things down, and you align the things that you do on a daily basis with those values, then it feels like passion work. It feels like authentic work to be doing. But if one of those values is also self-care, however you define that, then you create space for self-care, however you define that, whether it means starting the day with a spiritual practice and making that a part of your everyday life. That is self-care, and you're feeding the source of your energy. You're creating space to re-energize, to do the other things that are on your value list. Do you see what I mean? But that preliminary work has to be done. We do need to take the time to talk about what is important to us, what are our top 3 values, what are the things that we're going to champion throughout our lives, and organize work, organize our time, organize our efforts, organize our self-care around the things that are valuable to us, because then you know you're constantly moving in the direction of your values. But if you selected those and you decided and did the work to identify those, you can't be going in the wrong direction. Yeah.
That's true. I think understanding how to change your perspective on a lot of things that we do, and, you know, realizing that if I'm changing my perspective to not only attend to myself, but attend to others, it only leads to good things. And I think a lot of people tend to forget about that, especially in a culture where we are so individualistic in nature. We're always trying to uplift ourselves, but oftentimes when we're only uplifting ourselves, it only leads to the downfall of others, because we're not helping them through these actions. Oftentimes they don't even have the resources to do so. So it's an interesting balance that we all try to find, especially I think as being a part of the Black and LGBT community, because there's a lot of stereotypes that are labeled upon us. And to break those down, I feel like it's hard on itself. And that's one of the reasons why I wanted to make today's event, to show that, you know, we are capable of finding that balance. And even if we aren't 100%, we can at least be honest with that. So, Summer and Charity, I haven't heard from y'all yet.
Just call us out.
Yes, I was like, you know, I was wondering, is there any ways that y'all take care of yourself specifically?
Oh, you want me to go? Okay, it's up to you. Let's see. The ways I take care of myself, because, let's see, well, I work doing activism in the trans community, and also, I feel like I'm put on the spot. Let's see. I do work in the trans community, and I also promote safe sex. So I feel like having to work in the community and work with these people and always constantly promoting safe sex, giving sex education about STIs and HIV and PrEP and all those things. My way of self-care is practicing what I preach, and since I always have to be in the community and talk with people and give advice. I like to make sure that I keep myself up. So I do that by, you know, doing my hair, getting my nails done, my feet done, well, they're not done now because, you know, playing the violin, so can't really wear long nails. And those are ways I work on self-care, because you can't constantly drill into people's head, oh, you need to practice safe sex, you have to do this, you have to do that, if you're not doing those things yourself.
That makes sense.
Yeah, so, I mean, I'm not gonna lie, so the whole concept of self-care is fairly new to me, because until someone told me, hey, you should focus on yourself, I was like, oh, that a thing people can do?
That's the thing. It is a thing. It's a vibe, too.
It's crazy, right? And so now what I realize is I kind of had to separate like my work from like what I consider self-care, because I realized that I was placing so much focus on like my job and letting that kind of like define like who I was and like what I wanted to do. And so, so yeah, it was just about trying to find things that I was doing just for me, not because I thought that, oh, this is good for work or this is good for somebody else, but like just for me. And so what I found is that I like to play video games.
Same.
And not even like the super like serious ones. No, I play like Mario Kart, right? Just because it's something that I don't have to think about a lot.
Right.
It's so like I can just sit and zone out for like an hour and be like, oh, okay.
Cost effective.
Yeah, it's exactly right. Like
Instead of those $1,500 PS5s. Gotcha.
yeah, no, I'm just listening.
That's a lot.
I bought a Nintendo Switch and I called it a day.
I love it.
Oh, as someone who has a PS5, listen, I was literally playing yesterday. I was like, okay, if I'm going to be preaching about self-care, I need to at least play at least a couple hours of video games.
Right, exactly.
I mean, no, I've even started like putting it on my calendar, like charity time. And that is when I just sit and I'm just like, okay, you're just going to do something that is not work, it's not for someone else, it's just for you. And so, I mean, I have to be very proactive about it or else I just won't do it. So
That's good.
So,
yeah,
yeah.
you have to build it into your schedule.
Yeah.
Like, that's why I meant when I
You
said
do.
like the discipline of it, right? Because
Yeah,
especially
yeah.
there's such an expectation of us to continue to work, continue to output productivity, that if you don't build it into your patterns of life,
it
you
just
can't
won't
just
happen.
sit there and expect,
Right.
oh, one day
Right.
I'll find rest.
And you
Yep.
need somebody to
Yep.
hold you accountable too. I mean, I talk to my mom about this all the time. Every morning I ask her, what are you doing for yourself today? Because every time I talk to her on the phone, she's doing something for my brothers, my sister, my niece and nephew, her mother, other family members. And I remind her every day that, you know, if there's no you, then there's no me. So I need you to be here as long as I can and as healthy as you can be here. But healthy in the sense of, to your point, self-care, right? The things that you need to do. I think a lot of times it's, you know, I told her it's as simple as if you want to go for a walk in your neighborhood and like shut everybody down for 15, 20 minutes, 30 minutes, an hour, do that. That's what it is. As you said about video games, like I work out a lot, physical fitness and wellness and health and wellness is huge to me. And it makes a big difference when you take out time for that. I think a lot of us, we in this fast-paced society now, COVID told us real quick to slow down, stop, reset, find out what's going on, and you saw a different you real quick, right? And so you know, everybody around you saw a new them, and you didn't know what was going on at home because you're never home, and then you're like, oh, this is what this place looks like. And you know, if you have a spouse, you're like, oh, that's what they've been doing. You know, so you're just like, oh my God, I didn't realize they were so messy, or oh my God, I didn't realize they did this, because you're like it's like the expressway. It's 100 miles an hour, right? And so with that, it taught us to calm down, reset, come back, and I told people this because everybody was up in arms, but I'm like, it really takes time for you to focus on you. And that's one of the things that came out of it from a standpoint of self, for you to focus on yourself and make sure that you're self-care. Because a lot of people, to your point earlier, they depend on you. And if I'm out here giving me to everybody, I also have to give to myself, right? So in order for me to give to myself, I have to take that time out. I have to make sure, to your point about the calendar, you have to take care of you. There's only one you, okay? And at the end of the day, it's got your name on it. Your own social security number is yours. Can't nobody else use it. So you need to make sure that you are doing what you need to do for you to be successful. And if you're doing that for you to be successful, in everything that you walk in life, you'll be successful. And just by bringing the energy of yourself and your aura, you will make people better when they're around you. Trust me.
I find that really beautiful, like the aspect of not only building self-care aspects into your schedule, because I, as someone who is trying to learn how to do that, I find it very hard because I'm always on the go. And especially for me, I feel like since I'm always on the go, I don't necessarily have time to think about, okay, how am I taking care of myself? Literally, I go home and I'm just like so tired that I instantly just like knock out. But I'm like, am I essentially practicing what I'm preaching? And that's a lot of the question that's been coming to me lately. Like, am I actually pushing the message that I'm trying to push onto the community onto myself? Because if I'm not pushing this message correctly, if I'm not actually practicing what I'm preaching, like something like you said, is it genuine? So that's something that I've been constantly questioning lately. And I think with this event, it's really been like opening my eyes with all the aspects that you've given so far of just like, okay, I actually need to sit down and take time with things. And I know for a lot of us, especially a lot of us who are students, who are out here working full-time jobs, it's easy to get caught up in the cycle. But I honestly think that it's important that you actually sit down and, like you said, Garth, put those values down and make them a priority. Because I realize that, when you don't make things a priority, they get lost in the sauce, like I like to say. And when they get lost in the sauce, it's hard to find. You're just like digging in the sauce and you're like, where? But I was thinking about this earlier. What happened to it?
Right.
And it's just like, that's not fair to yourself. And I really wanted to uplift that this time of the month and any month. So I definitely agree on your perspectives. And for a quote, because of course we are in Black History Month, a quote that, David had said earlier about Audre Lorde and self-care being an act of resistance. How do you think that some of your self-care methods are an act of resistance towards the things that have been put upon us as a community, especially within our intersection?
See, I think that's something that we need to rethink. I'm a strong believer in wherever you put your energy, that's what is glorified and magnified and gets built and grows. If you put your energy into resisting, then resisting is taking your energy. As opposed to using your energy to work towards and move towards the things that are more important to you and putting your energy there. So if your family is more important to you and that's one of the values you say is important to you, put your energy there. If your spiritual practice is important to you, put your energy there. So for me, and I'm a little bit fortunate in the sense that I grew up in Jamaica where race wasn't so much an issue. Jamaica, many other problems are an issue in Jamaica, but race wasn't so much one of them. Coming to the United States, and there's a practice in psychology. And I always fall back on my background in psychology that there's a practice in psychology. Well, what would you do if you didn't have a malady that you were dealing with? So if you take away the oppression and the history that is Black history in the United States, how would you have thrived? What would you have been doing? What would you have given your attention to? And we can live our lives very fruitfully by putting your energy there rather than in the history of the United States is what it is. You can't ignore the fact that this was our history. But if you have limited amount of energy, and you absolutely have limited amount of energy, we all do, giving your energy to the things that are important to you seems more fruitful to me than directing so much of our energy to resisting things. It's very easy for me to control the things that are within my grasp, the things that I have control, my energy, the things that I do with this body, the things that I do with this voice. It's very difficult for me to control the things that other people say. Their definitions of me, and there's a very famous quote that says, someone else's opinion of me is not my business. I completely agree. You have little control over the things that people try to impose on you. You have 100% control over how you behave and how you react and where you put your energy in, the things you put your energy in. And I think if we drive our attention there, we're likely to have a lot more fruitful lives because we have defined what's important to us and aligned our energy with those things as opposed to trying so much to fight against the things that are coming towards us that we have very little control over. Not that you will ignore those things, but the majority of your energy should be focused on the things that are important to you, I think.
I think it's a nice, interesting twist on the quote itself. And I never really thought of it that way because, especially as activists and being a part of the FIU community where, you know, we're supposed to be worlds ahead, a lot of the times there's this impression that is put upon us that we have to be constantly working hard to change the world. And I realized how heavy of a burden that can be, that ideology. And I think like rerouting your focus, like you said, routing your focus towards healing and promoting growth within the community. I think that's a nice, interesting twist because I never really thought of it that way. I was like, I always have to resist what has been put upon me. I always have to, you know, fight back against these ideas and labels that have been put upon me about like family who don't necessarily truly know me, or, you know, friends who thought they knew me. But I realized, now that you say that, how draining that is to resist all the time. So I think I really appreciated that perspective. So I guess now to twist upon that question, in what ways are you promoting growth in your communities that you are leaders in?
I mean, I think there's several ways to grow. I think that being a leader in the community, and I do a lot of community engagement work with United Way, with the county, and so many other groups. You have to show the growth in yourself. It's more like a, you know, you see me, and so because you see me, you see you type situation. And so growing in that space and understanding that when you're helping people, you're also helping them grow. Because when you are doing a backpack exchange to stack backpacks and give them to kids so they can use them for school, they're growing. Otherwise that would not happen because they would go to school with nothing, right? So then you're not only are you growing as a person because you're getting a lot out of that experience knowing that you're helping somebody, you're also understanding on the reciprocating end that they are being helped, and so their growth is substantial, right? And so it's very critical that we understand that growth comes in many forms, it comes in many spaces, but I think talking about self-care and self-preservation, it starts with you. What is your growth? Like, where have you grown from? Look at the day and say, hey, well, I got this done and I didn't think I was going to get it done, or I'm doing this over here, or now I'm taking on this venture and I didn't think I was going to do it, but now you're giving your time and energy to it. And I think that whatever that is, that's going to help you grow, whether it's doing community engagement, where it's doing activism like she's doing and helping her community directly, those things make a difference. And that's when you see those things in fruition, that's the growth, right? And that's the reciprocating end of the growth that you put out there through yourself.
I think there's to add to that, there are two things I think we need to remind ourselves as people of color and LGBTQ identifying individuals who are in any kind of leadership position. The first thing is to show up. And you know, you have opportunities to impact your community, and a lot of us don't show up. And just by being there, you know, who you represent, and you know, when you see Travis walks into a room and he's dressed up, decked out as he always is, that's a visual that stays with you. So showing up, and even if just by your presence, I now have someone I can see that might hold me to a higher standard of myself. That's the first thing. The second thing is, when you're in leadership positions, the assumption we all make, as is often imposed on ourselves, is that, well, this is what's good for you. And I'm very careful to tell people, I can share with you what I've done, but I don't expect that what got me here is likely to move you forward. So as leaders, the thing we need to be sure to do is to ask the people in our community, what do you need? What do you think will make a difference for you from where you are right now? And to see where the opportunity is to give them, or to share with them, or to welcome them into spaces that'll move them forward, you see. But we don't ask that question very much. We make assumptions about what our community, the individuals in our community needs, and we're all at very, very different places in our growth. and to understand what is needed of an individual. And you won't probably be able to solve all their problems for them or to give them all the things they need, but you may be able to give them that one little thing that moves them towards, you know. And the idea isn't to save their lives or to, you know, transform them into some magnificent being all of a sudden. It's to give them that one little thing that is within your capacity to give that moves them in the direction that is important for them. But you can't do that if you make assumptions about what that person needs. So the first thing is to show up. The second thing is to ask people, what do you need? What's going on with you and what do you need? And then think to yourself, what do I have that can contribute to them in a way that's meaningful for them?
That's beautiful. I definitely think that a lot of the times, especially with a lot of leaders in our community, I think it's easy for us to assume what we may need, what the community may need, like going back to the idea of assumptions. But oftentimes, we may not be exactly correct. So I think, you know, giving the platform for folks who need the time and the space and autonomy to just simply exist, to give them that platform to simply ask, okay, I may need this to help other folks in the community. Oftentimes, I feel like we don't get that enough. There's many folks in this world who feel as they're doing the right thing, but are they actually sitting there and asking the community what they need? And that sense of being genuine with the community is often what we don't see. So being like realistic with that, I think, is really important too. I know, especially with the Pride Student Union, we often ask our community what we need, and we make sure that we stay in touch with our community through Discord, WhatsApp, and I think that's a really awesome opportunity for us to learn about what type of experiences the students are having, and we keep those ideas in mind, especially moving forward. So in terms of like taking care of yourselves and being leaders in the communities, are there any boundaries that you set within your leadership roles? I have a hard time with boundaries, so I think this question is personally for me. But like I love and care about my community so much, and the people that I'm supporting, oftentimes, like I'm saying, I don't give enough to myself. So what type of boundaries are you setting within the spaces that you set for self-care?
Well, first of all, for me, like, I'm not a superhero, and I had to tell myself that. I know, right? I know. Wow, I can't do it all. I know, Erica, right? I can't do it all. But and I had to understand that. And on the flip side of that, I had to understand that everybody's not me too. So then I needed to understand that intersection and say, Travis, how much can you give? What can you give? It's like donating, right? Because when you're giving funds, you're giving dollars, you're giving a quarter to something, you're giving 50 cents. You have to know what is your level of giving, right? And so understanding that, like, I'm not a superhero is something that I had to really, because I was ready to save everybody. I mean, anybody that wanted to get saved, get on this bus, because Travis is going to drive you to the promised land. And I knew that I could take some people, maybe in a Lamborghini or something with both of us, but I knew I couldn't like get a bus and take everybody. So and it was like, okay, I'll come back and get you, but and so I really had to sit down and have that conversation with myself. Like, okay, Travis, I mean, I was involved in so much stuff. And even when I was a student here, I was overly involved, which I really enjoyed my college experience a little too much. But we, as an involved student, it was great. And I helped, I made the Rory costume. I did all this stuff. I cheered the first ever football game we ever had. I never missed a football game a day in my life. And so, but I had to I couldn't take everybody with me. And so I try to do that as I understand that going through my community engagement stuff and working on so many committees and stuff. I'm like, we're not going to solve it in a day. I can't be everything. I'm not going to be the chair of this. I'm not going to be the chair of that. I'll be a member and get involved but leadership is in my blood. However, I have turned and understood that everybody doesn't need that. And so I don't need to give that to everybody, right? And so, because there are hijackers out there and people will hijack you and hijack your niceness and, you trying to give yourself to everything and, let them do it. They always do everything. Don't be that everything person. Don't do that do-it-all person. You are not that person, because sometimes you want a break too, and having a break is not you getting up and going to the restroom and then coming back and you still in a 2-hour meeting. Seriously, because you have to, I think we have to be real with ourselves. Like, And then as a boundary, like with work, like if you contact me after 5, we're gonna have a problem. And so I understand that like you had from 8, I get to work at 7:30. I'm supposed to be there till an hour later. You had from 7:30 to contact me because I'm up at 4 o'clock in the morning to go to the gym. All that time till 5 o'clock. If you can't get it in then, we got a problem. So, you know, I try to create that boundary. On the weekends, no. And the thing is, you have to set that expectation, even as a leader to the people that I report to, that I have reporting to me. It's a bunch of student assistants and stuff like that. And so with them, it's different, right? Because I know that they need a little bit more care. So I understand when they call me. One called me before we started the discussion, and so I take time out for them and help them understand what's going on to be there for them, because sometimes they don't have anybody else. And on top of that too, I wish I had somebody like me when I was them. So, you know, I try to give that to them and be that self-reliance to them. But yeah, you have to, when it comes to adults, you have to listen, take care of you first. If there's no you, there's no everybody else. Remember that.
So I think I have some gas money to get in that Lamborghini.
No, you know, gas got a premium. You gotta put premium in there. That's $6.
Well, my Honda's ready to go. So.
Hey, listen, take mine too. Yes, $40.
Well, but if I can jump off of that, actually, with boundaries have been ridiculously difficult, right? And like they shift every day, right? Mm-hmm. There's times where you're great at them. There's times where you uphold your boundaries. Mm-hmm. You set things, you set your standards, you know what you're capable of doing. And then there's times where like all things happen in life, it crashes and burns, right? That doesn't mean that you're starting at ground zero. That just means you have to recalibrate what energy you have, right? Boundaries aren't just with time, but I think I heard you say this in your comments, Travis. It's also what can you give of yourself, right? I remember that there was at least a period in my life where I would say yes to everything. I thought that I needed it for the opportunity, for the exposure, for access. I wouldn't get opportunities otherwise. My family paid so much for me to be able to be here. I mean, like in their sacrifice, their time. I work my job, so I pay for school, so let that be on the record. I paid it myself, right? But they did everything. They did so much for me to be here, right? And so like that was a driving force behind this constant desire to be productive and to put my self-worth on my ability, right, to produce. But I hit that moment where I did so much and I said yes to so much that I barely did anything for all of those things that I gave my time to. That I was not dedicating any quality time. That I myself was not growing from the experience, and the folks that I was showing up for were not gaining anything from me either. I was not able to show up with my presence. I was not able to give into anybody else. I did the bare minimum. I did what was expected from me, A, B to Z, and then I disappeared. Right? And I even lost the ability in those working environments to network, right? To grow from other folks, to ask for help, right? You even lose that when you don't have boundaries. And so people all of a sudden started to say, maybe that's not the person I count on. Maybe that's not the person to work with. Or maybe that's the person you go to for everything. But maybe they're not at that level of leadership and influence to be able to bring a team together because they're just fumed out, right? You can see it in when somebody's stressed in a situation. So when you set those boundaries, and again, it can start with something as simple as saying, today my to-do list has X, Y, and Z. I'm going to choose this one thing to move to tomorrow, and I'm going to vocalize that with my team, right? It can be very simple. Start with the little things, because setting our boundaries is it's a practice. Where you guys are going to hear from us constantly is that this is something you have to build. It is something that has to become a part of your being and that you prioritize yourself. So it started like that, me telling people, I'm going to do this because I feel like I need to be present, but I can only give you 2 hours instead of the whole day because I have to do X, Y, and Z, right? Somebody told me at some point, you are in charge of your calendar and your schedule. Nobody else is going to tell you what to do. You just know when things are due. So shift things around, right? So the way that I look at my boundary setting is if I'm juggling 10 things, I identify of those 10 things, what is a glass ball and what is a plastic ball? Because my plastic ball can drop and it'll bounce back. Right. But my glass ball needs me to put my attention on that. So identify what those things are, how you're going to divide your time, and then understand which can be set aside and which can take a break, right? And of course, there's privilege behind being able to say no. But at the end of the day, if you can't make it, if there's no you, they're not going to rely on you. You're not going to be the person that's going to be called upon. You're not going to be the person that's going to be leading the team. You're going to be the one that is so fumed out after everything that you've done that you will never receive out of what you're trying to experience and learn from, and you will not be able to surpass what you've hit already.
I'm like, dang. Because literally,
We coming at you.
yeah, hello? Because I'm like, literally, I feel like that's exactly what I've been feeling as someone who, since like high school, has been in like almost every extracurricular you can think of. It's just like, it comes to the question of like, who am I without helping people? And I think that's a question that's been like scaring me lately because I don't know. And I think I want to be like transparent with that, and just making sure like the audience knows that it's okay to not know, but give your chance to explore who that person is without helping others. And you know, starting with the small steps of boundaries, I think that's like really important too. As someone who juggles so many things, I tend to think that everything is a glass ball. So I'm thinking, if I drop this, oh my God, this person is gonna be like so upset with me. And it's just like, I don't think it necessarily needs to be that way. And a lot of people tell me, and they've just been trying to knock this into my brain, that like the people who love you will understand the boundaries that you're trying to set. So I think that's like really important. I want to make sure the audience knows that the people who truly love you and truly care about you will understand that, okay, I can't do this today, but I may be able to do this another time this week. And that goes with so many things. So I thank you for your perspectives on that. And since we're talking about boundaries in that source of like understanding your perspective in self-care, there's been this idea while I was doing research for this event. There was a lot of opinion pieces that I saw that was like, you know, self-care is actually selfishness. So I wanted to hear your opinion on that. Do y'all think certain aspects of self-care could be selfish?
It better be. Because
But the way they were kind of taking it was
they're
like in a
oh,
negative
it's a bad
way.
thing. Like,
Yeah.
oh my God, no, you better be selfish, folks, because let me tell you something. There are a lot of takers. People will take everything that you have. Anything. I'm talking money, your essence, your energy, everything. And when you have nothing left and you need something, they're gonna look at you and be like, I don't know where you're gonna find it, but I can't do nothing for you. You don't want that. Okay? You first. You. Selfishness is has a negative connotation to it, but when you're talking about self-care and self-reliance and you taking care of you, you have to take care of you. Nobody else can do that. Like I told you about your social security number, nobody else can touch that except for you. Nobody can give that out but you. Nobody can access that except for you. So what has your name on it, right, is yours. And so you have your name on you. So therefore, you need to understand that selfishness is not something in your vocabulary in terms of in a negative context. Understand that you have to take care of yourself, and some days, you can't do it all. You can't be it all, and you just don't want to talk to nobody. You just want to sit in your room and watch TV and roll over. That happens, and that's okay. And you're not being selfish because you don't want to help somebody. No, operative word.
Wow.
Take that with you. Learn it.
I'm learning too.
I know, right?
Learn it.
Could have brought a pen and
Learn
paper
it
up
young.
here.
Because like she said, I was an involved student. I was Mr. High School. I was all that stuff coming out of high school. So when I got to college, I just knew that's what I was supposed to do, right? And I mean, I was giving a lot. I was in student government. I was in dance marathon. I was in all these other student organizations, and I took away, while giving everything to everybody, I took away from me, right? And so taking away from me caused a lot of academic struggles, right? And caused me to stay here longer than I wanted to. But, and I don't look back and change anything because it was great experiences. However, I learned a lot from that, right? And you can't be it all. You can't do it all. You cannot, you're not a superhero, and I think that, you find your purpose and you understand that. And I tell people all the time, I was talking to Pam the other day and yesterday, and I came up with this beautiful quote. I'm going to read it for y'all because I was just thinking about us, and I was like, oh, this is great. Walk in your pride and you will become your purpose. And so thinking about that and understanding that is walk in who you are. Be proud of who you are. We talk about that a lot in the LGBTQ community. We talk about being proud of yourself. In the Black community, we talk about being proud of yourself. Black pride is it, Black boy joy, Black girl magic, Black excellence. We talk about that all the time. But walk in that. Walk in it every day, and your purpose will come to you on that journey, on that walk of life, of being Black, of being LGBT, whatever your identification is, it will come to you. So take that with you today, folks.
Wow, how does it feel? Thank you, Travis.
I just came up with that before I talked to them.
Thank you, and I really appreciate that sense of like, okay, it is okay to be selfish. I know, like growing up in a Caribbean household, selfishness was not in my vocabulary. You had to give where you needed to give, and that was it. And like, I didn't realize how haunting that was for me. Especially, you know, always wanting to give because this is what my parents did, this is what my grandparents did. That generational aspect of like giving your all. But it's like, okay, how can I be the one to break that ideology and uplift a new sense of idea for the upcoming generations of my family? And I think that's something that I'm trying to practice and preach to not only the communities that I serve, but also my family members. And the folks who have come from like Caribbean households or any household who was seemingly demanding in the sense of giving yourself always, being apologetic always. It is not necessarily like that. You can stand up for yourself. And I know it may not seem like that way, especially like with your parents or whoever your guardians are. But, you know, practicing that within yourself in the relationships that you are building, I think is really important. And that can really inspire others. Yeah. So, of course, y'all know it's Black History Month. So I was wondering, is there any Black historical figures that stands out to you in terms of the way that you take care of yourself? For me, I know it's Audre Lorde. Love her.
Okay.
I love it.
For how you take care of yourself?
Just in general.
I wouldn't say I have anyone that I could think of as to how I take care of myself, but I do know about a few people who paved the way for us as LGBT individuals, and one of those people is Marsha P Johnson, because she led the Stonewall riots, and she paved the way for the trans community and also the gay community, and look where we are today with her just for standing up and believing in who she is.
I think Marsha, in all of her greatness, definitely goes back to that ideology of like, you know, becoming your purpose and see how much that inspires future generations, and how the simple act of her leading the riot, which doesn't get enough credit, it shows that, you know, when people actually pay attention to the figures that stood out and weren't necessarily represented as much, how much of an impact they actually made. So that's something I really appreciate. Any other historical figures that stood out to y'all in your journey? Or do y'all always fall back on in terms of motivation?
My ancestors.
Okay.
My ancestors. Because without them, I wouldn't be here. And so I know that my 23andMe, right, my Ancestry.com, my family, my hood, you know what I'm saying, at the house, there would be, I just would not be here. And so every day that I wake up and I'm breathing and I can give to somebody or give to myself, I'm always thinking about my ancestors, because again, without them, there's no Travis. You don't see me, right? I don't exist. And so for those folks, to make them proud because they did, I can, right? And so because I can, I shall. And so I keep going through that every day. And so for me, I always think about my ancestry, my family tree, you know, who came before me to show me how to get it done, and the things that I need to do to make them proud, and just to Garth's point, showing up every day makes a difference.
That makes sense. I really appreciate that.
And I'll add on to that. So I think education is really important to me. That's why I wanted to be an educator. And so as far as like how I look at, like, you know, I think of like that picture that everyone knows of like the painting of like Ruby Bridges, like going to school that first day, and think about like all that she had to like endure and things like that. And I think about like, why does she have to go through all of that? And then like, so what will I do to make sure that, like, you know, like future generations don't have to deal with that, you know? And thinking about just like Black people in general, like in education. And so I have like educators like in my family, and like even like my mom which in South Carolina, like she was the first person to, she was like among like the first group to like integrate her school. And like she always tells me about like everything that she had to like deal with, being called like names and like all this stuff. And I think about that stuff and I'm like, wow, like she had to go through that so that I wouldn't have to go through that, right? And so I think like that's kind of like what like motivates me to like keep going, especially like in like the work that I do. And so it's like what I'm doing now is so, and I think of, so okay, this is really random, but I think of like
okay.
the Jay-Z lyric, like Hope did that, so hopefully you want to go through that. And so and so like that's kind of like what like goes through my head, like okay, I'm doing this now so that like the kids who are looking up to me, like my nieces who I absolutely adore, I'm like, I'm doing this now so that it could be just a little bit easier for them later, right? And part of that is them seeing me take care of myself, right? Like not seeing me like always stressed and like always working, but like, hey, like Auntie is like having fun. That's cool. But she's also like successful. That's cool too, right? And so like saying like, yeah, you can be both, right? So yeah.
I agree. I definitely want to like reroute the question because I think, you know, pointing out your mom and pointing out family members that you want to make this life easier for, I think is really important. So is there anyone in your family or friend circles or even spiritually that helps you be uplifted during these times?
I'd say my father was probably one of the biggest influences. I'm fortunate that I had two parents who did not have parents. So my mom's mother passed when she was 2 years old. My dad's father left his mother with 6 children when he was like 4 years old. And somehow these two people knew how to raise children with an authority that I don't know where it came from. So I think they organically knew how to be good parents. And so a lot of my influence, I think, came from parents. You know, I had a mother who believed that, you know, you should never refuse someone food. And so feeding others was always important. I had a father who believed that, you know, you should never cry over spilled milk. So whatever happens in life, it's your responsibility to move beyond it. And he was full of, you know, these isms and sayings. You know, I remember one time I was having a really, really hard time at work. And I wasn't calling him for advice. I was just calling him because I hadn't heard from him in a long time. Because my dad is not necessarily the most huggy person. You think of a black Jamaican man like this is, you know. And I called him and I just happened to be sharing with him what was going on that day. I'm not sure why I would because, you know, it's a little of a countryman, so he doesn't quite understand, you know, the U.S. academic system. And clearly he heard me enough to say to him, but you're making them forget who you are. And I almost crashed my car because I'm like, wait a minute, when did you become, you know, this kind of person? But that's who he was, that in his very simple terms, there was an expectation of the person that he raised that should and is supposed to show up in every event. And that's what I'm telling you when I speak about holding yourself to a higher version of yourself, holding yourself accountable to a higher version of yourself. My parents, I think, helped us craft for ourselves an idea of who we were supposed to be by themselves modeling that kind of existence, working hard, creating industry and providing for family and providing for a community. And then organically we knew that there was a standard of excellence that we're supposed to be working towards. Not because it was imposed, but because we saw how it worked and how important it was for the individual, but also how important it was for the community. So it became organically a part of what we, how we operated as young, with 3 of us as boys, right? So definitely my parents, and I hear their voices all the time in my head. And my mom who passed, I feel her all the time. And I think it stays with you when, you know, and I encourage everyone to do that. You know, we're not all fortunate to have good, strong, solid parents, but if you have just one person who pours into you quality, who pours into you good guidance, good wisdom, you know, one, be thankful for them, tell them thank you, and secondly, hear their voice when you're going through difficult or not so nice circumstances. And I find that a lot of the times the voice is always there, even if their presence isn't.
That's really beautiful. As someone who takes a lot of ideologies, my dad, he was a funny man. He used to give me advice about the craziest things, and I'm like, Dad, what does this have to do with the situation that I'm asking for? But now, you know, that he's, you know, passed away, I hear his words all the time. And he was one of those gravitating forces that I don't think I was thankful enough for. But I think now, you know, realizing how much I miss him, you know, I think it really just shows that his ideologies, sure, they didn't always make sense, sure, they were hilarious, but they had a bunch of meaning to them. So I really thank you for pointing that out. And, you know, just to anyone, you might be that inspiring force to someone, and you may not even realize it. I get a lot of comments from people talking about, you're such a huge inspiration, and I'm like, but why? But it's coming back to that essence of like confidence and realizing what type of messages you want to push out there for people and what type of model or just person you want to be. And even without intentionally realizing that you're affecting someone in a positive way, I think it just shows how good your energy is. So if you find that within yourself, or if you find that within someone you care and, you know, love and support them and help them realize that, you know what, I really appreciate the things that you do. You don't know how much that really comes along for a person, especially during these times where everything is so unpredictable. Having that sense of, you know what, someone actually cares about me. It's easy to lose that perspective, but when you remind people or when people remind you, it feels really good. So I guess that's a little message for today. If someone you love has been just like really great, send them a quick little message. Hey, I love you. Thank you for being you.
Give them flowers.
Yeah.
Yes.
Exactly.
Gratitude
Yes.
goes a long way.
Yes.
Yeah,
I definitely agree.
definitely. So from family members, I'm going to take a little bit of a reverse here because everybody has honored the past generation. I would actually have to say my baby sister. My little sister was the first person to ever genuinely ask me, what do you want to do? There was not an expectation. There was not a falling into patterns, right? Because usually with family members or close friends, they learn what to expect from you, right? So then they kind of build this of like they're waiting for you to fall back into that pattern, right? My young sister was the first person to say, if this isn't serving you, or if you're not happy at where you are, he's like, what do you want to do with this?
Yeah.
And there really was no background to her question. She genuinely wanted to know, if you want to shift from here, where do you want to go? And that completely changed the perspective of my life, right? So definitely have to honor her for that, because she was one of the first, again, people to show me, because she was the first generation raised in the States, she showed me this beautiful, like, space of being in that hyphen, right? So many of us tend to find that struggle of whatever you are, like Dominican American, that hyphen there. I was like, not enough of either. So where am I falling? Where am I sufficient? And even within that, saying, okay, so where's my blackness fall? Where's my queerness fall? My family here is, you know, trying to put everything into specific boxes, and inevitably actually untying the intersectionality of what made me find a beautiful, unapologetic life. My sister was the first one to say there is no prescribed patterns to find into what you want to be or who you are. And like she would just, we were talking about earlier, right? These profound questions that this young little girl would ask when she was in the back of the car, and I'm like learning to drive, and I'm like, shut up.
I need to
Get you to
we need to get to point A and point B.
I'm like, settle down, Plato. So I definitely want to honor her for changing the trajectory of my life and for like just giving me this influence of finding the power in who you are and of just showing up and taking space. And the fact that there is no kind of cyclical expectation of where profoundness comes from, right? If you have this gratitude and openness to learn, it really is going to flow from whatever fountain you're nearest. And the second person is actually somebody that works at FIU. He's running around campus, so I know he's not watching this right now. Not because he doesn't care, but because he's working. But his name is Jocelyn Raphael, and that is the biggest reason for my life being a success. That man poured education into me, time, brilliance.
He is that person.
He is that person.
Absolutely.
He taught me how to set boundaries.
200%.
He was the person that when I first hit a wall and I had nobody around to make a decision of, he really sat me in front of my decisions and didn't guide me anywhere, but said, I am here to provide you whatever information or access to support you need with whatever decision you make. That is a critical person to have in your life. And Garth touched upon it where he said, it is really not our place to tell someone which way to go, right? You might see the tools in their hands, but they might learn how to do things differently with that tool, right? It's like math.
Oh my
She's a
God.
math professor. She's a math professor. We were talking about that's
I'm
not the
having
area.
flashbacks to chapter
right?
3 in my dissertation. Oh
Yeah.
my God.
Ooh. So it's just, you know, we find such creative ways to have the same tool but make a different outcome out of it. And so to have someone in your life that is willing to see and try to be as unbiased as possible in the sense of removing their background, their influence, how they've lived through life, and to say, you can forge this path. I see the tools in your hands. I'm going to tell you what I know to do with these tools, but here's also the way to evolve from that. And that has been Joken. So.
I definitely have to meet this person because I have not met this person
Definitely.
yet.
Oh,
No, absolutely.
Cool. Yeah,
The literal definition of
Joken
black
is it.
excellence.
Yes.
We are very lucky to have Joken at this
Yes, sir.
university.
Yes.
Really? Okay, I'm gonna have to check him out. Also, we love math. Okay.
That bank account.
That's debatable.
This is not a PSA.
Right.
I am
right.
secure in my love for math. It's fine. It's fine.
So I know we've been talking a lot about, you know, how we've gotten to these places of understanding self-care and how we take care of ourselves. And Pamela, Z, I really like how you focus on the fact that you did hit a wall. I wanted to bring up this perspective of the difficulties that may come up with self-care and like setting boundaries. I was wondering, has there been like any huge difficulties in your lives? I'm pretty sure, I mean, there's difficulties every day, but difficulties that have stood out to you and that you've overcome that you can, you know, let the students know about? I know for me right now, it's the boundary setting for me. It's the boundary setting and, you know, figuring out who I am without taking care of others. So that's been like my biggest struggle so far.
Wow.
Yeah.
I think probably, and this is something that I think a lot of young, not just Black or LGBTQ identified, just young people in general are challenged with, and I see it in my students when I have conversations with them, and I'm grateful when they come to ask me about these things, is that you being able to let go of expectations that are placed on you that are not in line with what you're trying to do for yourselves and where you think you want to drive this life that you have, right? And letting go of those and pivoting towards a thing that feels more authentic, more truly you, more in line with the gifts that you've been gifted with, as opposed to, trying to create a life that has been prescribed for you. I think that was something that I had to learn, and I also actually think as LGBTQ individuals growing up, y'all should have learned this lesson a long time ago. I tell you why. A lot of what society has prescribed for our trajectory, as for our psychological development, for our physical development, for our social development, wasn't designed for LGBTQ communities. Do you know what I mean? So there was no blueprint that fit us. And by prescription, that means, well, you can create your own. That means outside of whatever is expected of us, there has to be a space for us to say, well, clearly don't fit this model, don't fit that. My gifts are not in this area. So now I have to let go of those expectations, and clearly I have to create something for myself. I have to define for myself what is important to me, what should I be moving towards that inherently you authentically uses the gifts that I'm inherently gifted at. And I think that's really important. So talking about that's one of the things I think I had to learn very early. But it came to me at a point when I realized what society is expecting of me, I just don't have the wherewithal to do. It just doesn't work for me. And not because I have a choice in the matter, but because this isn't who I am. And I know that much. So then it makes it, you have no choice then, or you should have no choice, but to give up this thing that's been expected of you and to pivot towards something that feels more authentic, to craft a life that feels more authentic with the gifts that you know you have. you know, and I think that was probably the closest I had to one of those life-changing kind of difficulties that you have a realization, it's like, okay, this don't work for me. Clearly I have to do something else, you know, and you pivot. The willingness to pivot towards the thing that feels more authentic to you, that leverages your gifts more fully, is something I think we all struggle with.
I definitely agree with the aspect of letting go expectations. I have a huge problem with that. As someone who really focused on a lot of validation from others, especially growing up, it's still a struggle for me now, trying to figure out who am I without the compliments of others, or like, oh my gosh, you are really good at this, you should try this. But I'm like, do I actually want to do these things? And it goes back to that question of like, who am I without the perspective of others upon me? And I guess that's what I'm gonna take my life figuring out. But because I know for me, these questions and like these events, I didn't necessarily have the resources or access to, especially in public schools where they didn't really teach us about a lot of these things of like letting go expectations, setting boundaries. They kind of just gave us the basics and rolled with it. And it's just like, how is that beneficial for any, and you know, the education system can need so many improvements, but like, it's just like, how is this helping the students that you're trying to teach? Like math, science, and reading, that's not gonna be necessarily the answer to all the questions we have in life. And I think that's one thing I really appreciate about college and the Student Affairs Division, because we really bring up those aspects of the questions that need answers. And we need role models that we didn't often see while growing up. So I definitely think y'all are such a huge inspiration to me, because I definitely did not see y'all growing up, for sure. So to be a part of...
I know, about to, we didn't see us.
Okay, maybe we just weren't seeing each other, but we're seeing each other now. And, you know, like events like these, and I really just thank you all for showing up today, because it really just means so much to see that we're actually taking these ideas and bringing them into fruition into ourselves and to other communities. So even for the folks who have come today, I really hope that you take the advice and all the awesome perspectives that you learned today and bring them into the communities that you love. And of course, bring them to yourself, because we have to self-sustain ourselves. So before we get into audience Q&A, because it's already 4:42, the last question I have for you all is, if you had any advice you could give to your younger self, what would it be? Oh, not everybody with the...
Let me see. My advice I would give to myself is not listen to what anyone thinks, or not listen to what they think about you or their perception of you. Because growing up, backstory, I'm a trans woman of color. So growing up, I was always told, oh, little boys can't do this, they can't do that. So for me, I always liked things that were sparkly and shine. Then I liked baby dolls, then I liked Barbie dolls. So going over to my relative's house, I would play with my cousins, because majority of my cousins were girls. So they would catch me playing with the Barbie dolls, and they'd be like, no, you can't do that. Go outside and play football with the boys. Don't want to do that. So it was like me being at home with my family, with my parents, because I have 2 older brothers. They're like way older than me. So when I tell my parents what I want, they would get me what I want, but then my relatives would be like, oh, you shouldn't be buying him Cabbage Patch dolls, or you shouldn't get him a kid sister. You know.
Take it back. It ain't even Thursday.
So I would just tell my younger self, don't worry about what people think about you. Everything is okay. Being feminine is not a bad thing. Just be who you are and embrace it, and go to school and learn as much as you can, and then you're gonna grow up to be an amazing person. So that's pretty much what I tell myself. You're welcome. Oh, I know you want to.
I think if I could tell my younger self something, it would be that Travis, it's okay to find self-care at like 10 years old, 11 years old, 12 years old, 18, because I've always been a person that I've always been giving of myself. I mean 210%, and I give to so many people. And if you're having a problem and you're my friend, it's 2:00 in the morning, I'm up, I'm ready to go. What's going on? And being there for so many people, I didn't know how to be there for myself. And so I think that looking back, Travis, it's gonna be okay. Self-care is gonna be okay, and you're gonna make it. Because as a young kid, my mom was instrumental for me, and she, till this day, she is like my superhero, because if you didn't think there was one, she's that for me. And so she taught me so much about loving myself and being who I am, and not allowing anybody to write my narrative but me. So understand that, and she really made it her business to really instill in me a confidence and a power of confidence that I didn't even know existed. And then as I got older, I was like, oh, okay, she did something, because I didn't know what was going on, back then, because you're young. So and I realized in high school, graduation day, we're driving to graduation, I'm sitting in the back of the car, and all of a sudden, it hit me, and I was like, oh my God, wow, everything she said in life, just from 5 years old to 18, hit me like a ton of bricks. I was like, oh, that's what that meant. Oh, the epiphany was huge, right? And so, just understand that you can do everything without, you can be who you are and still take care of yourself and do everything, but do things for you too. So I think that's the younger version of myself, to be tell everybody no.
Okay.
Heavy on the no.
Right.
Yeah.
Heavy on the no. I love that. I think for me, the advice I would give to my younger self, first of all, I would give my younger self a hug. For sure. I was very self-isolationist when I was young. People thought I was shy, but it was just hard for me to actually put my ideas into fruition and actually think that people would care about my ideas. So first of all, I would give myself a hug. And I think right now, more than ever, I've been learning to take care of my inner child, because I realize that's where a lot of my trauma lies. So realizing that and moving forward with that perspective of where do I actually want to go? How can I heal myself by doing this is important. So I'll give myself a hug and just let myself know that it's okay to be you, because a lot of the things that I was just being myself for, I've gotten bullied for, and the things that I was getting bullied for are now common trends. So it's so interesting to see how the world kind of plays out in that way. But, just to let myself know that everything will be okay and it's okay to be yourself, I think. If I wouldn't give myself too much, because I wouldn't want to change something. I watch too much Marvel, so if I feel like I changed the timeline
You don't want the butterfly
of myself, yes, the butterfly effect, there you go. Yeah, not Disney Plus, but yes.
Ready for Moon Knight to come out.
Hello, but yes. I think that's the advice I would give to myself. So I think that is it in terms of our panelist section. Thank you so much for your perspectives. And for the next 5 to 10 minutes, we have the option for an audience Q&A. So for the folks on Zoom or on YouTube, you're able to ask any questions that you have. Also the folks in person, if you have any questions, feel free to ask. We have the microphone here. So
I was like, they're just
Let me
doing
know.
so well. Let them speak.
oh, you can go on ahead.
Hello.
Hi.
So I have a question coming from the Zoom community.
Sure. Bless you.
Do the panelists have a book or podcast that they recommend?
Ooh.
Oh, child, I don't read.
What genre are we talking? Because I listen to a lot of random stuff.
Yeah.
Like I was literally listening to video game lore the other night, so I don't know. I don't know if that was what y'all looking for.
Podcast.
A tennis podcast?
Yeah.
I love that.
I would
That's what I was
say,
listening to.
I mean, obviously this person's amazing. So anything by James Baldwin, you can never go wrong. I mean, never. Who else? I read a lot. I'm reading 1619. Will Smith book.
Oh, was it good?
Yeah, it's good.
Okay.
It's
Will Smith.
The 1619 Project. Yes.
Okay.
Top tier.
Well, I'm currently reading the collections and like poems of Audre Lorde, so that's been like my biggest thing. Yeah, going back to historical figures.
Yay.
Okay.
I see you.
I think there's a book that I recommend every living soul should read. It's a book by a psychologist who actually marries psychology and spirituality, and the book is called The Road Less Traveled. The professor is Dr. M. Scott Peck, and the first line of the book says, "Life is difficult." And then it goes on from there to help you understand what difficult means. What I like about the book is that it marries psychology and human behavior with spirituality. The two are not in lieu of each other. You know, who you are as an individual, especially as an LGBTQ identifying individual, is not in lieu of a spiritual practice. The two can coexist really, really well. And he writes very practically about how to live the life you choose with its flows and ebbs and its beautiful parts and its difficult and challenging parts. It's all a part of our existence that you're supposed to navigate through. But there are ways to do it meaningfully. And I think that's a really, really good book for anyone to read. I literally recommend it to everyone. Yes?
I have a question for like all of you. Let's say there's like a viewer like watching. Do you guys have any like advice to them dealing with like bullying when it comes to like transitioning or just like being different? Like a current issue today, not like but like just for I don't know, someone that's watching. Or
That's a good question.
Would you mind repeating the question on the mic so that the people watching online can
Okay,
hear?
no
Thank
problem.
you.
My question is basically like, any advice for anyone dealing with like transitioning or like, you know, identifying as something that people are like, oh no, that's not what you are. Or just like for in today's society, because, you know, I'm pretty sure everything is kind of different than how it was before. And I know like there's a lot of kids like that are scared to come out because they're afraid of what people say, but what they don't realize is once you come out, like everything's literally the same. It might seem different, but I feel like certain people shouldn't let what people say get to them. But yeah, any advice?
That's a good question. I definitely think it comes down to like safety first.
Yes.
Because if you're not in a safe environment to come out or to transition, I would say hold off on it until you are in a safe place that is that has offered resources that can help you out. You don't want to put yourself in a position where you can be potentially harmed due to being yourself. So just being conscious of your environment and where you're putting yourself in. So that's one point I would like to give. Yeah.
Hold on. Grab the mic. The Zoom folks gotta hear you.
Hi guys.
Me too.
So I don't know necessarily with pride if like because I view myself as what's the word when you're or what's the term when you're not bi no
Question? I thought she said black. I was like, what? That's the word, black. Yes.
Right, hold on.
I think it's when you're stimulated, like your mind is stimulated, not like
Sapiosexual.
yeah, so
Yeah.
yeah. I view myself as a sapiosexual, and sometimes it's hard for me when I'm just being myself around my peers or coworkers, and they assume that I'm just like, you know, into them or they're into me, and because I'm not into them, it's like really weird, and then like, I don't know, but they don't get that I'm not really looking for like attractiveness. I'm just looking for like mind things, and like if they are interested and I'm not, how do you like avoid like any conflict, especially when you're working with them, because a friend who's now not a friend and I worked with him, like, you know, it's kind of detrimental to like my career in the future, because obviously he's doing really good works now and I don't know how to reach out without being weird, because obviously I wasn't interested in the beginning.
This is where those boundaries come in
Right.
beautifully. For, like,
You don't-
boundaries are really saying no and being very clear. Like clear communication. You know, usually when you ask people for advice on relationships, they'll be like, "You have to communicate," and you're like, "What does that mean?" It literally means be as clear as possible, because what you're extremely aware of in yourself, no one else knows. Not even your closest friend will have the language to identify your feelings, your uncomfort, your triggers, your area of joy, right? You don't ever have to give of yourself more than you want and comfortable with as well, right? So also understand that you don't ever have to over-explain yourself in any environment. So just be as clear and as concise or as lengthy as you want to be in saying, in establishing your boundary of professional relationships and anything outside of that. That's maybe one of the easiest and lowers conflict ways in a place of work, is to be very defined on, this is a place of work, and here this is a colleagueship, right? And even, at least for me, I like to keep them separate. So even with folks at work that I'm establishing a friendship with, I will tell them, well, we establish and we work on our friendship outside of our work hours, right? But at work, I stick to these conversations. Obviously, I'm gonna check in on you, your health, your family, but I make it very clear because that's my boundary. And people have learned to respect it, even with people that I'm completely close with. Even with supervisors who outside of work, that line might not exist because of our friendship. In work, I'm very much, this is your role, this is my role, and this is what we're gonna function off of. And even with new folks coming in, they know not to test that line with me, right? And understand that there is literally nothing wrong with the word no. Even if that compromises, if you feel like that is putting you in a compromising place for growth in your place of work, that means that you are in an unsafe place of work. And it's called HR. Now I understand. Truly. I understand that HR brings its
human resources.
Truly, I understand HR brings its politics with it. So be aware of that as well, right? We are in the real world. I do not like to sugarcoat things. Everything is politics. HR is hired by the company that you're working for.
For the company.
For the company. But understand that is a place of advocacy for you, where if you're not comfortable giving that HR person all your information, what they are there to do is to give you the resource and information that protects you. Yeah. So get that information. Have it on your side, because you can only advocate for yourself. You know what you've said no to. You know the boundaries that you've set. And so now with the information that's been provided to you that the company is held accountable to, use that to your benefit if you are in an unsafe work environment. Yeah.
You make that sound so easy.
Right.
I said you make that sound so easy.
I mean,
but it's not that easy
no.
with men. They are persistent.
No, yeah.
And you tell them no, they see that as a challenge.
Yeah.
Hi guys. So I am someone who grew up in a Haitian American household, and being in that household, there's like a stigma associated with being friends of someone from the LGBTQ community or just being in the LGBTQ community. And I consider myself an ally, and I'm constantly, learning and developing and understanding the problems within the community and just understanding how I could become a better ally. So my question to you guys is, how can I continue to improve and become a better ally to my friends and to my classmates as an ally of the LGBTQ community?
When you educate, you eliminate. Okay, and so continuing to educate people, and I've really come into this and saw it when I was younger, and so when you educate somebody, when you're the only one in the room, everybody talks about, oh, I'm not a spokesperson. Yes, you are. Okay, yes, you are. I'm a spokesperson for us. I'm a spokesperson for being black. I'm a spokesperson for being from the South. Whatever that is, in that moment, yes, I'm going to represent it, and I'm going to show up, show out, and shut it down. But to your actual question, educate and you will eliminate. When you educate someone on something, you eliminate all biases and anything else that can come around, that can come in a form of anything else that's negative, that they didn't understand, that they didn't know. And that's a beautiful thing about education, right? So when you as an ally, you continue to educate those who don't understand, right? And then you can come to us like you just did with your question and get additional information and education, right? That now you can take back and you can branch out and tell it to other people. So that's how you get that done.
Thank you.
That's an awesome question. Okay, it's 4:59. We have one last question. Zoom, anything?
Anything on Zoom?
Nope. Okay. All right. Well, thank you all so much for being a part of this awesome conversation. I want to thank our panelists again for being amazing and dropping some awesome gems. And I also want to thank the Pride Student Union, the Pride Center, and Black Student Union for giving us the opportunity to speak here today. And hopefully, folks on the live stream, I hope you all enjoyed. And now we can sit and mingle and eat some more chicken and waffles. So if you have any questions,
You missed it.
yes, if you have any questions for the panelists, feel free to ask them as they come down from the stage. And I'm pretty sure they're going to need some water and things, so give them like 5 minutes. But thank you so much, and thank you all for being here. Thank you.